I'm Haley. Welcome to the whole podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Korf. I am your vision impaired host for the podcast. We are going to go ahead and do a part 1 and part 2 for this episode. We are just so excited about the conversations we're having, but it took a little bit longer than we anticipated. So we're going to do part 1, part 2. And so for right now, we're going to do a quick ad and then get right back into it. So thank you so much for waiting around. We really appreciate the support. Thank you.
Here at The Whole Person, we believe everyone deserves the chance to live independently and with confidence, regardless of ability. And to make that happen, we need volunteers like you. By joining us, you'll have the opportunity to support impactful areas, from administration and event planning to hands-on roles like assisting with our blind and low vision programs, or helping at our special events like the Big Dill Classic and Expressions Art Exhibition. Every role, whether it's outreach, community engagement, or even offering pro bono professional services, makes a lasting difference. The Whole Person serves over 2,500 individuals annually, and with your help, we can make their dreams a reality. As a volunteer, you'll become part of a vibrant, supportive community dedicated to empowering people with disabilities. Our roles are flexible, meaningful, and tailored to fit your interests and expertise. Ready to make a difference? Visit thewholeperson.org/volunteer to explore our wide range of volunteer opportunities and get involved. Together, let's make independence accessible for all. Just a little of your time can lead to amazing change.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Haley Korf. I'm your vision impaired host. And today we are interviewing Michael Kelley from BikeWalkKC.
Hello.
Hello. It's good to have you here
Thank you for having me.
on a beautiful Friday that is so windy that the doors will snap off, right?
It's fantastic. So,
Yes.
Mhm.
So, for those of us who don't understand BikeWalkKC, do you want to explain it a little bit and your role in how you help your company?
Yeah. So BikeWalk KC for listeners is a nonprofit organization that works to make it safer and easier for people to walk, roll, bike, or use public transportation in and around the Kansas City region. We like to explain our work as you shouldn't have to drive in order to thrive to live in the Kansas City region. And so we work to do that through several key areas. So policy, which is my wheelhouse.
Hmm.
We advocate for the policies, the plans, the projects that make it safer and easier for people to use those modes. And we do that work in Kansas City on both sides of the state line, but also at the state level in Jefferson City and Topeka, and at the federal level in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's quite a job.
Yes, it is. And so policy is one part of it. Education, we teach children and adults how to safely walk, bike. We have one of the largest education programs of its kind in the country. We also have a community planner on staff who leads our community planning efforts. So if communities need things like technical assistance or developing things like active transportation plans, that's something else that we do. We also do data and research. So we have a community dashboard where people can learn more about active transportation elements, things like zero car households. And then the
Mm.
last big thing is that we run the area's bike share program. So if your listeners are interested in using bike share,
Mhm.
that is something that we work to provide in Kansas City, Missouri, North Kansas City, and then parts of Johnson County as well, and Wyandotte County.
That's a lot. Like, my brain is not wrapping around all of it. So what I'm thinking is you'll have
Yeah.
to come and do a presentation for our
Yeah,
community.
Absolutely. And I'd be happy to.
That
So,
would be great. Okay,
yeah.
so you do education, you have a
Mhm,
dashboard,
mhm.
and you advocate for policies up to Jeff City, which is the bigwigs.
All the way up to DC.
Oh, DC. My apologies.
No, you're good. You're good.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
And I just got back from DC. So one of the big things that we do each year is we attend what's known as the National Bike Summit. So that's
Oh.
organized by one of the big national transportation groups, the League of American Bicyclists. And so as part of that, it's an opportunity to meet advocates from across the country. So
Mhm.
we got to hear from folks from as far away as Boise and as close as St. Louis to talk about some of the work they're doing. But it also includes an opportunity to go onto the Hill and talk with members of the Kansas and Missouri congressional delegations about the work that we're doing and why it's important to invest in things like sidewalks,
Mhm.
trails, and public transportation.
So just to just to thank you for our community. That is some work that I don't think everybody understands fully, and I know that it is greatly needed. So thank you so much for helping our community with that.
Of course.
Sidewalks are always a big conversation in the blind community,
Hmm.
because you've seen me use my mobility cane, right? And
Yes.
so if you're walking with a cane, sometimes you could impale yourself and not realize it until it's too late.
Right.
So thank you so much. I'll send all the people your way.
Of course. Of course. We'll take them. We'll take them
Love
gladly.
it.
Yeah.
So what made you get interested in policy? How did that come about?
So with BikeWalkKC specifically, my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to travel to Vancouver, British Columbia. I don't know if you've ever been
I
there,
have
but
not.
it is a beautiful city. If you ever get a chance to go, highly recommend.
Okay.
But my wife and I were up there for an entire week, and we only used a car once.
Ooh.
Everywhere else we went, we walked, we took the bus. I actually didn't bike when I was up there, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but it is what it is.
It is.
So we come back to Kansas City, and I was working somewhere else at the time, and I step out onto my porch, and there's no sidewalk. The bus stop down the street is bent over at a 45-degree angle, and
Oh.
there was no bike infrastructure to speak of. And so I was thinking to myself, man, why can't we have something like Vancouver in Kansas City?
Right.
And so a couple weeks went by, and this job came up with BikeWalk KC.
Mhm.
And so I applied initially to be the policy coordinator.
Okay.
And then when my predecessor, Eric Bunch, left to go join the city council, I was promoted to first policy manager, and then I became policy director in 2021.
Wow. That's that's quite a history. Wow. I, I guess I don't understand how the policy works for the greater part of Kansas City enough to ask you more details. So what would you want the public to know about how we could work with you more on that? Because I know that that's a big part of it.
Yeah, so when it comes to policy and advocacy, what we often explain to people is that what happens outside your front door is so much more impactful and so much more tangible
Mm,
than what you see or hear about in Washington D.C.
mhm.
And the decision makers at your city council oftentimes have a much bigger impact on things like sidewalks, like accessibility elements than your congress member or the president. And
Mhm.
so it really starts with asking people, do you know who your council members are? Do you know who your board
Yeah.
of aldermen are? Do you know who your county commissioner is?
Mhm.
Because oftentimes those are the people who are making the decisions about where you can walk to, the type of houses you get to decide on where you want to live in, what sort of grocery stores are available, things like that.
Okay.
So it goes beyond just active transportation and really gets into the question of what sort of community do you want to live in? What sort of community do you want to see for yourself and your family?
That's interesting that you bring it up because I feel like a lot of people my age and younger still are struggling and learning and maybe haven't been as involved as some of the parents and family members. And so I feel like we're just kind of late to the game and jumping in. So
Yeah.
any advice you have, I appreciate it. So thank you for that
Of course.
information.
Of course.
Um, it's just scary sometimes how
Yeah.
much information is out there. You don't know where to go.
No, no, no. And I'll be the first person to say that, it can be very intimidating, but that's part of the reason why Bike Walk KC exists. So part of our work involves helping people to advocate for changes that they want to see in their community.
Hmm.
So if someone will come to us and say, hey, I really want to get a crosswalk here, and
Hmm.
we will work with them to help them figure out, okay, what is the process for requesting a crosswalk in your community? Who do I need to
Hmm.
go to? Do I need to attend meetings? if you need to go through the process of getting your neighbors to code to the meeting as well,
Hmm.
that's something that we've done in the past. I can give you an example from the Kansas side. There was a woman by the name of Leah Moggins. She's a mother of a young child, and they were walking along Lee Boulevard, and they were attempting to cross the street near where they live. And her son was unfortunately struck by a driver and was seriously injured. Thankfully, he's okay, but Leah, understandably, was irritated about that.
Yeah.
And so she reached out to BikeWalkKC and said, "Hey, how do I get a crosswalk here so that, people know people are crossing here and someone doesn't get hurt?"
Yeah.
And so we worked with her to identify what the existing policy was. There wasn't one.
Okay.
Then looked at, how do you need to advocate to your council member? Do you know who your council member is?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so we worked with her over the course of about 9 months to help her go to meetings, to go to her neighbors, to make the case to the traffic engineer. And
Hmm.
what ultimately happened was she was not only able to get the city to adopt a crosswalk installation policy,
Hmm.
but she was able to get a crosswalk installed where her son was injured. So it is really about bringing those changes from the paper to the pavement and helping people to make those changes. And so that's one of the best things about my job is being able to help people make changes in their community where they live.
That's really amazing because that support is greatly needed. For my own purposes, I struggle with crossing streets as well, because I'm always nervous a car is going to hit me, even though I may or may not be using my cane. It just, you
Right.
never know. So that's really important that you're able to help advocate because there's not enough of that.
No, no, no. Unfortunately, there isn't, and so we definitely look for those opportunities to help people where we can, but we also try to be proactive in terms of providing things like trainings for people to learn the basics of transportation advocacy.
Okay. Okay. Um, I think we should collaborate more outside of this podcast because I do training on how to work with people who are vision impaired. Like sighted guide is a technique
Hmm.
where you can help lead a person if there's a lot of construction or whatever the barrier may be.
Yeah.
And there's proper ways to do it and there are improper ways to do it. So I would like to maybe help with that a little
Yeah.
bit.
And also say too for the listeners that BikeWalk AC has been fortunate to work with the whole person in the past.
Yes.
The education team has a tandem bike where we will often provide rides for people who are visually impaired because visually impaired folks still deserve to be able to participate in things like cycling. It can be a really beneficial activity for folks if they have the proper tools and
Yes.
support to be able to do that.
Yes.
And we've also been fortunate to work with the whole person on policy elements. So part of the reason that Kansas City now has a complete streets policy is because of the advocacy of groups like the whole person. So I just want to say on behalf of Bike Walk KC, thank you to the whole person for that support.
That is so great. No, thank you for working with us. It really just takes a village to make the community because everybody has different pieces of the puzzle and you just don't know what's missing until you work with everyone.
Right. Absolutely.
Love it.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have deviated quite a bit from our questions, which is fine,
Yes. Yes.
but we do have some good questions here. So if it's okay, I'd like to kind of jump in.
Yes, of course.
And please bear with me. And for those who are watching, I'm trying a new piece of technology to me to help make these podcasts a little bit more accessible. So if you see a question or something that I might have missed, you please jump in. Okay, I
You
will
got it.
not be offended.
You got it. You got it.
Okay, okay. So I'm thinking. It says, are there any upcoming policy initiatives where collaboration between organizations could be impactful?
Yes. And so one of the things there's probably two big things I'll highlight for your listeners.
Yeah.
The first is our Transportation for All coalition, and then the second is our Community Transportation Academy. So first, with the Transportation for All coalition, we were fortunate to receive funding last year from the Equitable Transportation Fund that supports efforts to address transportation challenges for different parts of the community across the country.
Okay.
And with that, we were able to form our Transportation for All coalition, which is essentially a regional collaborative effort to understand the challenges of of our region from a transportation perspective and begin to figure out how we can address those. And so through that coalition, we were able to work with the organization Porchlight Insights. which is headed up by Kate Bender and Julie Steenson. So, two folks who used to work for the city of Kansas City, Missouri, in their data office.
Okay.
And they were able to help us with some of the data elements, looking at surveys, getting a better understanding of what the situation is on the ground. But the other part of it was working to develop a coalition of social service agencies, advocacy groups like the Whole Person, and
Mhm.
others to really understand what are the challenges that you were seeing and how can we advocate for something better. So working with those groups, we were able to develop a policy platform that anyone can see if they look up BikeWalkKC and the Transportation for All Coalition.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now that we're in the second year of that, the work continues to not only, now that we've identified those issues, begin working to uh, figure out how to take action on those things. And
Okay.
so that would be an opportunity for BikeWalk KC and the Whole Person to work closer together.
Yes.
So with the Community Transportation Academy, the second item,
Mhm.
one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that it is not enough for us to just simply help someone get something. If we're proactive about this work, it must include teaching people to be better advocates. Because when you are a better advocate, you are able to be more effective at getting the sort of changes you want to see in your community.
Mhm.
And so, with that in mind, we did last year our first version of what's known as a community transportation academy. It's based off of a model that we saw from our partners with 1000 Friends of Wisconsin, a
Okay.
sustainability focused group. And so, what it essentially is giving people a crash course in transportation advocacy. And
Okay.
what it really is focused on is not just explaining to folks, how to be advocates, but why specifically our region, from a transportation standpoint, is the way that it is. And
Mhm.
so, we spend we spent 10 weeks helping people understand, what are the basics of our region? How does things like redlining and racism from the past still impact us today? What
Mhm.
does our transit funding system look like? And
Mhm.
why does that need to change? And then moving into what are things like power mapping? How do you identify who the decision makers are, but then who influences those decision makers?
Mhm.
And all of that put together helps us to create stronger advocates. People like Tony Waterhouse Leal, for example, are people who went through our first class and are now using those lessons learned to be better
You
advocates. So
didn't.
yeah, so
Oh
shout out
my
to Tony.
gosh.
Love Tony. He's great. And I hope that if he listens, he knows like Bikewalk KC is a big fan of his. Um, but it really is making a difference. So we've had people who have said, I want to go and I want to study this more. So we've helped people get into graduate school. We've helped people to
Whoa.
begin to develop bike ped advisory committees so that they can advise their cities on ways to better support the needs of people who walk, who bike, who roll, who use public transit.
Mhm.
But then we're also helping people to do more in the manner of actually pursuing changes in their community. So, is that in
Whoa.
need of a road diet? Does your community need crosswalks? Things of that nature.
Mhm. Interesting. So sign me up. All of the above. I don't
we
even
will
know all the things, but sign me up.
we will be doing our second iteration this year, and we're hoping to open up the applications sometime in April. So
Okay.
definitely stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and we are more than happy to share that information with our consumers. So please
Hmm.
just let us know when that's ready.
You got it. You got
Cool.
it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, what does it truly mean to create a place where people don't need to drive in order to thrive? I feel like we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but
Hmm.
can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think it's best to kind of start by answering that question by asking you a question.
Uh oh.
So,
Uh oh.
have you ever been in a situation where you've had to take away the car keys from someone because they're not able to drive?
Myself?
And how easy was that to do?
My parents did it. I was not happy.
So the reason why I bring that up is because for far too many people, about a third of the American population, for one reason or another, they can't drive.
Hmm.
That is either because they live with a disability, they have aged out of driving, they are too young to do it because they're kids,
Hmm.
they may be an immigrant, or for some other reason, they can't get the documentation necessary to be a driver,
Hmm.
or they can't afford it
Yeah.
because the cost of owning a car has gone up exponentially. It costs about $14,000 according to AAA to own a car
Hmm.
per year.
Yep.
So for all of those folks, it is impossible for them to be able to drive. And so when you think about all of those different parts of your community, you also have to begin to think, okay, if they're not able to drive, how are they able to go to school? How are they able to get to a job? How do they
Mhm.
get to medical appointments? How do they go to religious services?
Mhm.
All of these things suddenly become isolating to Herculean tasks to try to get to on a regular basis
Yes.
if you don't have access to good sidewalks, a good trail system, a reliable bus system.
Mhm.
And so when we're thinking about what does it mean to be able to not have to drive in order to thrive, it really is this idea of how do you make a community work for everyone in your community? And
Yeah.
so we know that transportation, more often than not, is a big reason why people aren't able to get the things that they need for a good quality of life.
Mhm.
And so when we're advocating for things like sidewalks, like bike lanes, like trails, like better transit,
Mhm.
all of that is built towards this idea that if we are fortunate enough in this life, we will get to a point to where we are unable to drive,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that we are unable to live. It simply means that the rest of the community has to be able to support us and build us up so that we can continue to contribute in the way that we know we can.
Mhm.
Because you are no less of a person because you can't drive. In fact, you are someone that we should be valuing more because you can't drive. And far too often, our policies are flipped, where we say that
Mhm.
we should invest more in roads, we should invest more in highways, rather
Yes.
than saying we should be investing more in sidewalks and transit. And
Mhm.
that ultimately makes all of us weaker, angrier, sadder, just
Mhm.
less fulfilled as a result.
I cannot add much to this because you said it so well, and it is just oh, there's not much I can say because that's, like, my whole life story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of
I'm gonna
course.
have you read my, biographies. I'll just be like, "You can be the voiceover."
Hey, I'm happy to do
Love it.
it.
No, you are exactly correct in that it's hard to it's very difficult to just go to the store or, just walk down the street and know that there's gonna be a sidewalk there, and, um, a lot of people in the blind community will move to somewhere close where they can walk to work, so I moved all my stuff, and now I'm, like, 5 minutes away from here, so I know that I can walk here,
Hmm.
and otherwise, I don't know about transportation. I wouldn't know if
Yeah,
I could get an hour away to a job or anything like that. It's
right. And just think about all the things that you're isolated from. Like,
yeah,
yes, you can get to your work, but what if you have a friend who lives over in Lee Summit or
yeah,
lives over in Kansas? Like, unless they're going to come and visit
I'm
you,
out.
right? You can't do it. You
No,
can't
and
do
I
it.
feel bad.
And
So
so that ties in with, I think, question 5, which is, what are some key barriers that currently prevent Kansas City
mhm,
from being more walkable and accessible for all?
mhm,
So I think high level, one of the things I want listeners to know about is that the way that Kansas City has developed is a big part of why it is not walkable and not accessible. So
mhm,
Kansas City, as we know it today, is significantly bigger in terms of land size than it was 50, 100 years
mhm,
ago.
mhm.
So a lot of what we see today is a result of the post-war boom. So
Yes.
following the Second World War, you saw Kansas City begin to annex its way further north, especially, but also further south,
Mhm,
outside of kind of the midtown, downtown area that most of us kind of assume is the most walkable part of the city.
mhm,
The problem with doing that was as they were in the process of annexing further north and annexing further south, they were bringing in parts of neighborhoods into Kansas City proper that did not have the same development standards that Kansas City itself had. So you did
mhm,
not have the same requirements for things like sewer lines
mhm,
or building restrictions or sidewalks.
mhm.
And so, because of that, you were essentially bringing in communities without having a plan of how to update them so that they are more in line with Kansas City standards.
Yeah.
And as a result, you're bringing in all these people, but you do not have a way to equitably tax everyone to help pay for all of the maintenance of all those things.
Mhm,
And so today, we are a city of about 500,000 people, which is comparable to places like Miami or Philadelphia proper.
okay.
But the problem is that we have a landmass that is much, much bigger than that. So I think someone had done a comparison at one point where you could essentially put it was something like Miami, Philly, and I think even Boston proper within Kansas City limits and still have space left over.
Really?
Yeah. And so what that means is that you're, as a citizen,
Mhm.
having to pay for a lot more land and maintenance, and we simply don't have enough to do it. And
Yeah.
that's a big part of the reason why there are still places where there are no sidewalks,
Mhm.
why there are so many places that don't have good accessibility, and
Mhm.
ultimately why we struggle as a city to meet all of those needs. Like when budget season comes around, it's always a question of we're not going to be able to get everything. Like that's something you constantly hear from our council members. And a big
Mhm.
part of it is because the way that we built and got up to this point, and still the way that we continue to develop new parts of the city, is keeping us from being able to build in a way that meets our most basic needs, including walkability and accessibility.
So what would be the better way? I mean, this might be a really big question, but
Mhm.
what would be a better blueprint to follow, if you will?
Part of it is making better decisions about what we do and don't build and where we choose to build and not build.
Okay.
So in short, it's very much a matter of priorities. If we know that we have existing corridors where there are things like grocery stores, doctors, childcare,
Mhm.
we should be upzoning those so
Mhm.
that you can also live there. You can have housing there. You can
Mhm.
have the things there that make it easier for you to not only stay in that place, but also to move along that space. And we
Mhm.
don't do that. In far too many places, zoning, where we basically say you can build this type of housing or you can build this sort of business holds us back from being able to build in a way that really creates multimodal accessible communities.
Mm.
And so the further that we get away from that, the further that we emphasize, everyone should have a white picket fence in a 2,000 square foot home or
Mhm.
3,000 square foot home, that means that we're not able to meet those needs. We can put in a subdivision with, say, 30, 50 nice looking homes, but in 10 years, they're going to come back and say, hey, we need sidewalks here, and we didn't plan for that.
Mhm.
So our
Mhm.
development standards play a massive role in how we build our communities, and it's going to be a big part of how we have to change our cities if we want to make them more accessible, make them more resilient for things like climate change, but also make them work better for a rapidly aging population.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, I know there was a question on here somewhere, and it was something about what other places outside of Kansas City have this blueprint that you would want to follow. Because I know that other places, I know my dad's from Germany, so he
Mm,
talks a lot about the transportation there and how it's phenomenal.
yeah.
But what other places would you identify as a blueprint, for lack of better terms?
Yeah, if you're looking international, this is something that we hear unfortunately a lot, where people will say something along the lines of, "Well, we're not the Netherlands." It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, you don't have to be like the Netherlands. You
Mhm.
could be like Kampala, Uganda, that has really invested more in bike infrastructure as well. You could look at places like Cali, Colombia, that have invested in significantly improved transit routes, walkability, and bikeability that creates a good network. Heck, even Mexico City would be somewhere that you would
Hmm,
want to look at. If you're looking
interesting.
inside the United States, there's pockets of it in places,
Mhm.
and they tend to be in downtown areas.
Mhm.
But I would say places such as Seattle is doing a little bit better around this.
Okay.
New York City has been historically a place that's done pretty well about this. But I think another place that doesn't get as much attention for having a good multimodal network is Washington D.C., our
Mhm.
nation's capital.
Mhm.
I was there. I was there recently for the National Bike Summit, and it was really really impressive. Just being able to take the metro to get in, be able to drop off my luggage, and then be able to hop on a bike share bike and just be able to cruise around the city because they have so many protected facilities, protected trails, and the way that it kind of envelops and works with everything. So you can see things like Ford's Theater, historical sites. You can see
Mm.
the cherry blossoms bloom along the Potomac.
Oh,
You can also ride by and get food from a Vietnamese place, a Jamaican place. Like
stop
it's
making
just
me
fantastic.
hungry.
But all of that is what makes it possible for
Yeah.
everyone to be able to live in and experience the city. Now, DC has its challenges. Seattle, New York City, they both
Yeah.
have their challenges.
Hmm.
But I think in terms of how they are building, how they are developing, there are lessons there that Kansas City can take and
Hmm.
bring here. And this is part and parcel with how Kansas City has done things in the past. They don't always say we're just going to copy this.
Hmm.
One
Hmm.
thing that I think Kansas City does well is they do a really good job of saying, this is one thing from Minneapolis, this is one thing from Denver, this is one
Hmm.
thing from Dallas,
Hmm.
and they're able to put those things together and create something even better. That's actually part of how they created our city's complete streets policies. They didn't just say we're just going to copy this. They're going to say what's the best parts of all these other places
Hmm.
that we can bring together to create something that works better for Kansas City.
Oh my gosh. That's really cool. Uh, I don't, you were just leaving me like blank minded because this is such great information, but I didn't understand all of the things that go into it. And I don't think many people do.
Hmm.
And so it's very interesting to hear what you're saying because this community needs a lot of help with different disabilities and it's every community is going to need help with that. But
Absolutely.
hearing you talk about this has almost like energized me to like get more active in this. And so I appreciate,
That's what we want.
but you're just like talking at high level stuff and I'm just like I'm just trying to keep up. So thank you so much for breaking it down. I appreciate
Of
that.
course.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to just take a quick break, maybe
Yes.
get some more water, coffee, all
Hmm.
that stuff, and then we'll come back and jump right into the questions, okay?
Sounds great.
All right. We'll be back, everyone. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our podcast. Today, I'm going to go through some of the monthly events that the whole person hosts. Again, my name is Haley Korf. I am your vision impaired host today, so bear with me. I've got a lot of notes here, okay? All right, the first event is Getting Social. It's the first Friday of every month. The next event is Time to Spare, and that is the third Wednesday of every month. That is our accessible bowling open to everyone who has a disability. The next event is Mind's Eye View, and that is the first Monday of every month. That is more geared towards people who are vision impaired or blind to get together and talk about some of the difficulties. Then after that, we have our DIY skills for young adults, age range 18 through 24, and that is the last Wednesday of every month. Brain Injury Peer Support Group, the second Thursday of every month. And then Tech Talk, the second Monday of the month. And that is also geared towards people who are vision impaired or blind to get together and talk a little bit more about accessibility issues. If you have any more questions, feel free to look it up at thewholeperson.org. And again, please join us for any event at any time. Thank you.